last year, with George Kittle on the field, McCaffrey averaged like 4.8 yards per carry. With him off the field, it was like 3.2. And then, Christian McCaffrey finally had a good game on the ground. He was running really unlucky, but like because of who he is through the air, if you just removed all of his carries, mind you, he currently leads the league in carries, but if you threw all of them out, he'd be a top 5 wide receiver by receiving fantasy points per game. And then you add in, he's getting like 18 carries per game. He is just such an absolute cheat code. What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Week 8 fantasy football. We're talking about risers. We're talking about fallers. We're talking about reactions from week 7. We're talking about everything you need to know here on the School of Scott Fantasy Football Podcast, here on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network. Theo Greminger and Scott Barrett every single week, bringing you what you need to win in fantasy football. Scott, what do you have tonight? What are you most excited to talk about, Scott?
That's a good question. So we led off the everything report talking about 4 key takeaways. 1, who is the true rightful Exodia quarterback? 2, who is the overall fantasy RB1? 3, the return of Rashee Rice. And 4, are the Bengals back? And so, you know me, I'm very much a contrarian, not simply for the sake of being a contrarian. It's just I'm unafraid to break away from the majority belief, from the crowd, because there's safety in numbers, but there's really not wisdom in there. The crowd is untruth. Shout out Soren Kierkegaard. All of like my best calls ever have been like takes I was immediately clowned on and trashed for. Like if you look at takes I've had where the majority of people seeing it laugh, I'm batting like 90%. And so I've just learned from that, where it's like, there's very few takes that are like truly embarrassingly bad. It was like CEH should be a 1st round pick. Kadarius Toney's going to be good on the Chiefs. Marvin Mims, Elijah Moore are really good. And and those weren't even that controversial, but it's like the controversial takes I had, like Lamar Jackson's winning MVP in his sophomore season. Christian McCaffrey is a guaranteed Hall of Famer. Things like this, where old takes exposed got tagged and people are clowning on me. So I have some of that in the lead off to this article. One I'm self-conscious about. I think this could very well just be stupid. I am nitpicking the return of Rashee Rice, where like I was disappointed. I know he scored a lot of fantasy points. I know he saw a lot of targets, but you have to bear in mind, this was an Exodia wide receiver for me. I was expecting guaranteed mid-range wide receiver 1 or better every week is on the field. And, you're not doing anything with this. You're not selling high. I just want a few more weeks. It was his first game back in over a year. I just want to keep monitoring the incoming data, but I was pretty critical. I was nitpicky with it. We can get into that. But the really, really controversial one was just a double downing on Jaxson Dart. And so I led off with, who is the real Exodia quarterback? If you followed the draft guide, hopefully you have a ton of exposure to Drake Maye, who is balling out, who looks incredible. What's your Tom Brady stat?
So Drake Maye just set a record for the highest completion percentage in a game by a New England Patriot, previously held by Tom Brady. He had over a 90% completion percentage. I believe he was 21 out of 23 this week. Just insane. Drake Maye is the QB3 overall right now, Scott. So running pure with that take. Really, really strong stuff from Drake Maye. And I feel like we talk about this every week. It feels like you're going to see a ceiling game from Drake Maye at some point, where he's going to put up just a massive win you your week type number, because the New England's sort of been in control of a lot of these games. They're winning games. They're winning some of these games quite handily. And the one really close game we saw from Drake Maye recently was a just a heavyweight fight with Buffalo, where that game was not really fantasy football friendly from a game flow perspective. So yeah, I mean, Drake Maye to the moon. Brett Whitefield and I podcasted today, and he thinks Drake Maye is playing better than any quarterback in the NFL.
Hey,
yeah.
From a massive Drake Maye hater, you'll love to hear it. He made me feel very, scared, insecure, nervous after a disappointing week 1 from Drake Maye. Said the film was awful, but no, he's been lights out. Another Tom Brady record about to be tied or broken or something. But I think he's about to have if he does it this week, it's his 7th straight game with a passer rating in the triple digits. I think that would be the most since Tom Brady in like 2017 or something. But yeah, he's balling out. And like you said, it's actually like we haven't seen a true ceiling game from him. He's not running anywhere near as much as I expected. He doesn't need to. He's playing at an MVP level. And like that might be the thing. Like he probably has a better chance of winning MVP than he does of finishing, I don't know, top 3 in fantasy points per game at the position. But this was all just a lead in for the spicier take, the take I wanted to give. And that's that I'm kind of like as impressed as I am with Drake Maye, who's balling out. I think I'm more impressed with Jaxson Dart, who like I'm already so excited to go all in on Jaxson Dart as my Exodia quarterback next year, regardless of the price, but he might already be the Exodia. And so the spicy take I gave, I put it out on Twitter 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that. Where I said, like you just know it when you see it. He's special. He has it. This is a real life franchise quarterback. This is one with like top 5 overall upside. And so I tweeted it out. I'm like, if I gave you my Jaxson Dart comp, I would be in big, big trouble. And everyone's like, let's hear it. I want to hear it over here. And I gave it. It's Patrick Mahomes if Mahomes started as a rookie, where it's like, Mahomes came out of the gates. It's just like, this is one of the best quarterback seasons of all time. But it's like, he didn't start if he started as a rookie, he would have been amazing, but a little bit more volatility, a little bit more raw, some rookie mistakes. And obviously Jaxson Dart doesn't have a Hall of Fame alpha wide receiver 1 in Tyreek Hill, greatest deep threat ever. He doesn't have maybe the best tight end of all time in Travis Kelce. What does he have? He has Wan'Dale Robinson as his wide receiver 1. Wan'Dale Robinson, who had averaged 170-yard game per season heading into this year. Wide receiver 2 is Lil Jordan Humphrey, who was on his couch 3 weeks ago. His offensive line is awful. He ranks 2nd worst in pressure rate. Awful supporting cast. And the dude is balling out. He ranks 3rd in fantasy points per dropback behind only Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. He ranks 4th in fantasy points per start behind only Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen. And I'm not a film bro. I'm not, but it's just, I see it. And you can't call me a Giants homer because this is the biggest Giants hater for you. I don't think I've ever told you guys to draft anyone except for Malik Neighbors and Saquon Barkley since the OBJ days. But like looking at it, it's just, he has the poise, he has the sack avoidance, the creativity in the pocket, the swagger. It's all there except for, the elite deep ball, which we haven't seen from Mahomes since Tyreek Hill left, honestly. And, more rookie mistakes and, improper footwork and whatnot. But like, this could be, I'm going to rank him like a spot or 2 below Drake Maye every week. I'm going to be stupidly high on him. He has the potential to, lead all quarterbacks in fantasy points per game, despite, like imagine if he had Malik Neighbors, what would be going on right now? And so, and like the big concern is like, can he stay healthy? Because he suffered a hamstring injury his first start, spent time in the blue medical tent 2 weeks ago. Last week, he sprained his ankle. He's like launching himself headfirst into defenders. But if he stays healthy, man, like it's so exciting. It's so much fun. The fantasy production's there. And like I said, so a control for the supporting cast, but also control for the strength of schedule. He's had one of the worst strength of schedules of any quarterback. He outscored season high against Denver, the most Denver's given up to a quarterback all year by like 10 points, the most the Eagles have given up to a quarterback all year, faced another tough defense. And in the Chargers, he ranked top 3 in passer rating allowed. And yeah, man, I love Jaxson Dart. Awesome keeper. I think a future star. And this was a take I put out. I tweeted it out, and immediately it got quote tweeted with like, guys, we don't have to do this. It should be illegal to comp any player to Patrick Mahomes, which like true. I agree. Like this guy's an idiot. They really like, give Twitter accounts to anyone, or like fantasy analysts should be like let out to the firing squad. And like those quote tweets got thousands of retweets. I don't care, man. Like I'm willing to risk being wrong, but like, this is what I see. This is what I see. And if you can, make, actionable bets on it, like where is Dart in your super flex rankings right now, Theo?
Yeah, I'm doing a big dynasty rankings update, and it seems like after every week I'm having to go into my positional rankings and update it. Like I had this conversation with Brett. I think realistically he has to be top 7, and it's a small sample. Like and it sounds hyperbolic, but okay, you can't put him in front of Mahomes, you can't put him in front of Lamar, you can't put him in front of Josh Allen. You're not ready to put him in. I'm not ready to put him in front of Jaden Daniels. I think Drake Maye is right now about a spot ahead. Jalen Hurts, and then after that, I think it's Jaxson Dart, and Jaxson Dart ahead of Joe Burrow is one where some people are like, well, guys, what about Joe Burrow? I mean, I had this conversation with you. Like, I docked Joe Burrow a lot for missing time in 2 out of the last 3 years. Some people are like, it's dynasty. I'm playing this for like 10 years and it's whatever. I'm going to leave him there. But for me, it's Dart over Burrow. It's not even close. I love Bo Nix a lot more than some. It's Dart easily over Nix, even though Nix was fantastic this past week. Just Dart, he's able to do it with no one out there. I think he's also an elevator of talent around him, which I think we've seen that from some of the really great fantasy quarterbacks where you might question their personnel around them, but he's a good enough quarterback that he's actually making guys like Wan'Dale. You're pretty excited about starting Wan'Dale Robinson this week against Philly. You're thrilled to start Cam Scatterbo with next to Jaxson Dart. Theo Johnson has 4 touchdown catches in his last 4 weeks and 3 out of 4 weeks with double-digit PPR points. He was a 0 to start the year. So like Dart's got that magic to him where this past week we saw that late touchdown, and then of course Bo Nix goes down and gets the win. But that game alone was so impressive for Dart for almost the entire game. Honestly, the pick late was terrible, but that he was put in a bad spot, I think, by the play calling there. But like Dart did it, beat the hell out of the Eagles, goes on the road into Mile High and should have had the win. I think this is a big week, Scott, where he gets to play Philly again. And I think there'll be a little bit of apprehension in the market. I think the Giants are going to go right up there, and it's going to be another really, really close game. And I would bet on another big Dart performance. I think he's locked in. And last week we saw him score a ton of fantasy points without the rushing production. I mean, he had 50 plus rushing yards for 3 straight starts. Last week was like just the touchdown, no rushing production. I think we'll be right back to it against Philly this week. They had no answer for Dart last time they played. I think Dart is going to go into and have another really strong week against Philly.
Yeah. And you know what I was just thinking of? I didn't have it in the article, but like, look at what Daniel Jones did and how bad things were in this same offense with the same play caller, the same supporting cast, or maybe even a better supporting cast at some points. And look at what he's doing now, right? And like I'm not a believer in Brian Dable by any stretch of the imagination, but also like, I'm going to go listen to your podcast with Brett. I'm excited to hear that because let's not forget Brett got a lot of heat for ranking Jaxson Dart as his QB1 in the 2025 class. And for his comp of Jaxson Dart, which looks awesome right now, he comped him to Jaden Daniels. Right. And like, it kind of looks like we're watching Jaden Daniels, his 2024 season on repeat, except, maybe a little less careful with turnovers, but more fun.
Yeah, and no Terry McLaurin right now. So it's like, you give a healthy Terry McLaurin to Jaxson Dart. They both had sort of subpar offensive lines. And you have to imagine that this offseason, Dart gets back a player that's more talented than any offensive skill position player in the 2026 NFL draft class. They get back Malik Neighbors. And the 2026 class is really strong for skill position players, but nobody's taking Jeremiah Love ahead of Malik Neighbors right now. So he gets back Malik Neighbors. You have to figure that New York's going to push the chips in this offseason, get him those guys. I think next year he'll settle in as a QB, maybe QB6, Scott, though. I don't know if, like, it's hard to predict the 2026 ADP, but I still think he's going to be falling into a spot where he's a easier click than maybe a Lamar or a Josh Allen and that sort of thing. So completely with you on Jaxson Dart. He's unbelievable. And anybody who missed that game, go watch the highlights from Denver, New York. That was maybe the best game of the entire season. Two young quarterbacks just going at it. If you want access to the Everything Report that Scott writes with Ryan Heath every single week over at Fantasy Points, if you want access to my articles, to Graham Barfield's Start Sit article, to Tom Brawley's Waiver Wire article, all of the amazing articles that we have over at Fantasy Points, all of our amazing tools, all of our amazing rankings, consider a subscription to fantasypoints.com. All of our packages are discounted now, and you can get an additional 15% off of the already discounted price using the code Theo. The code Theo gets you 15% off of any package. They make fantastic Christmas presents, Hanukkah presents, birthday presents. Anyone in your life who wants to win in fantasy, win in DFS, win in Dynasty, and win in football gambling, consider a subscription to Fantasy Points. We've got you covered. And all of the analytics on this show and in Scott's Everything Report come from Fantasy Points data. Make sure you check that one out as well. Scott, you seem to be like not so hyped about Rashee Rice, a guy that you talked about all offseason long that was part of your draft strategy. We have Rashee Rice on several teams that we co-manage. We're running pure in FFPC main events. We've got an undefeated main event team. We've got an undefeated Big Gorilla team with the main event team with Abib Agbatoba, the Big Gorilla team with Rich Rebar. We drafted both those teams right here on the School of Scott podcast. I mean, there were people who were witnessing this one, but you were all about Rashee Rice. Rashee Rice comes back. He has a 29% target share. He has 10 targets. He catches 2 touchdowns. He's essentially the goal line back. Your thesis on this looks very true, and yet you're worried about the ADOT? Come on. To be excited, can't you be a little excited here?
Yeah. So Ryan, I wrote this, and then Ryan, left comments like, think you're galaxy braining this. Think this is just like bad, but I couldn't help but bring it up. So like the good is you probably drafted him as like a low end wide receiver too, and if you just look at the broader sample over his last 10 games now, he's hit 9+ targets in 8 of 10 games. He's scored at least 17 fantasy points in 8 of 10 games, averages 9.5 targets, 19.9 fantasy points per game. Those are top 3 numbers. The bad was he didn't have a route share over 50% in any quarter. Maybe that's just because it was over a year off from his last football game. This game was never competitive. But given Andy Reid's track record with wide receiver by committee approaches, I think it's worth bringing up. What really kind of annoyed me, though, was his deployment, his utilization. He had 15 total air yards. He had a 1.7 ADOT. That would be less than half that of Breece Hall. And also his route tree. 89% of his routes had a depth of 5 yards or less. 26% came behind the line of scrimmage. And so like I was trying to come up with a comp for this sort of usage, and shout out to Zane Dahani, one of our film charters, who came up with this for me. He was like, well, from highest end of the spectrum to lowest end, it would be Deebo Samuel, Jarvis Landry, CMC or Brian Westbrook, Jaden Reed, Marvin Mims. And that's right. It's just like, he's an extension of the running game in like the best and worst ways possible, where it's just like literally just this PPR merchant to the extreme. So I was expecting more. I was hoping for more. I was hoping he could be more of a complete receiver, because you did see that last year. He didn't see a lot of targets downfield, but when he did, he was one of the most efficient wide receivers in football, a plus 7.3 yards per target over expectation, which I think like nearly led the league. And again, this could just be his first game back and whatnot, but I think it's something to monitor. He's not a sell high. It's just continue to monitor. And again, like you have to keep in mind, like my expectations were probably higher than anyone's. I was expecting, mid-range wide receiver 1 or better. And like, for sure, like even if I'm right and my concerns are valid, it's still like a double digit target guy who's like a PPR cheat code to the max. So it was just something I wanted to take the time to write about, because I think everyone else is just like, Rashee Rice is awesome. Hell yeah. My 5-3 team is, just got a wide receiver 1, which is true. But yeah, I had to. What do you think? Am I galaxy braining this? Am I being?
I think you're galaxy braining a little bit. It's the guy didn't play football for a long, long time. You have the ramp up period. You also have the fact that it was a 31-0 football game. You're going to know a lot more about Rashee Rice, and I don't even think you're going to necessarily know the full story after Monday Night Football. Monday night, you get Washington with Marcus Mariota behind center coming into Kansas City. That game might be another one where things get out of control. Mariota's been a very good replacement quarterback, but that's a daunting task for him to win on the road in KC. But then, Scott, you're going to find out really, really quickly, because you've got the Buffalo Bills on November 2nd, followed up by Denver away, followed up by Indianapolis in KC, and then followed up by a November 27th game in Dallas, where that's going to be the most pressure put on Kansas City, because that offense is going to make you play a 30-30 game. So I think Rashee Rice, a couple of really big positives here. You mentioned the PPR merchant, but a PPR merchant attached to Patrick Mahomes, and he's going to get the looks inside the 10-yard line because he's their biggest threat. Like that we can work with. There's been a lot of guys who've been called PPR merchants who have been successful. It's the offensive environment for them. So Rice, I think we should be very, very happy. Again, 10 targets, 2 touchdown grabs, and the manufactured looks around the goal line are exactly what we want to see. The crowd is going wild for the guy. And it also helps my Patrick Mahomes becoming this year's QB1 thesis that I'm sticking to. Another 3 touchdown pass performance for my guy, Patrick Mahomes.
I had another galaxy brain take that Ryan hated. And this, like, for sure, like, could be just galaxy braining, but I said that paradoxically, like, Rashee Rice kind of hurts Patrick Mahomes just because, like, he has a receiver getting open now. So he has him in the short area of the field being open. And so he doesn't need to run as much anymore. And I also think, game script's going to be more favorable moving forward, because, like, that was the big thing with Mahomes. I know you're a big Mahomes is this year's overall QB1 and this is going to stick. But if you look at the numbers, by passing fantasy points per game, he's not really up at all. He's up like 0.9 over the last 2 years when he finished outside of the top 10 quarterbacks. It's really the running that has uplifted him. And I don't know that sticks, especially not with Rashee Rice extension of the running game being back.
Yeah, no, you make a great point. We'll sort of see where this thing goes. I do think Mahomes will have a big game on Monday night, but this offense, I think we're getting really, really excited about. Brashard Smith sort of is becoming a thing there. 19 carries for Brashard Smith, not on the show sheet, but your quick thoughts on Brashard, your enthusiasm level for rostering him. Do you think this is more of a, he's kind of got some contingent upside, or this is a, hey, the Jerick McKinnon thesis is there, Kansas City is trending up, and Brashard Smith's touches are going up at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not insanely bullish, but it is notable that the kind of looks he got. He 14 carries, had a 14.3% target share. 5 of his targets came on design reads. That was the most design targets any player at any position has seen in a game all season. So clearly there's upside there, and it's not like, Pacheco and Hunt can't be beaten out by a rookie. Like they haven't looked great this year.
Let's also talk about CeeDee Lamb's return. This is one where we knew CeeDee Lamb was going to come in and put up big numbers. Lamb, almost all of this production was loaded into the first half. Again, Dallas completely controlled Washington. I think if Washington would have put up more of a fight, these numbers would have been even higher for CeeDee Lamb. But 5 catches, 110 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets. Jake Ferguson continues to produce as a fantasy scorer. Ferguson gives you 2 touchdown grabs. George Pickens still has 6 targets. He catches 4 of them. A couple of them were the no separation looks where Pickens makes kind of spectacular grabs on the outside. 4 catches for 82 yards. And then Javonte Williams puts up a really, really big number. Is this sort of where we're at, Scott? First of all, your CeeDee Lamb reaction, but also, is this just the offense where you can start everybody, all four of those guys every week, start Dak Prescott, and just we're all scoring points?
Yes, absolutely it is. We were on this really, really early and in the offseason too, as Dallas as this year's 2024 Bengals. Part of this, I think, does hinge on Dallas's defense remaining bottom five. And what they did last week was kind of interesting. They really shifted to way more of a man-heavy approach, where they were like 95% zone, most in the league. And last week they were at 50%. Maybe that's just because Washington didn't have any healthy wide receivers. But, they did make that shift. And I think the personnel, this is another Zane Dahani take, so shout out to Zane. But the personnel that Dallas has is better suited for man. So it is possible their defense continues to improve. But whether it does or it doesn't, you still have Dak Prescott balling out to an insane degree. He's always been one of the more underrated quarterbacks in football. He's kind of like a poor man's Joe Burrow, honestly, in my mind. If you look at the advanced analytics by Fantasy Points data, you'll see every year it's like, who are the two most accurate quarterbacks in football? It's Joe Burrow 1, it's Dak Prescott 2, and there's no close third, or there's a different third every year, but those two always remain the same. So balling out, playing at an MVP level, looks the best he's ever looked, and he's always looked, super underrated to me. And then he has this great supporting cast and an underrated play caller, I believe. And so what I said in the article is CeeDee Lamb, let's follow this analogy. CeeDee Lamb is clearly Dallas's Jamar Chase. He's had 110 receiving yards in 3 of 3 full games. He had a 27% first read target share. He's clearly the one. And then you have George Pickens, who is clearly the team's T. Higgins, where, CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase is the alpha, but there's going to be weeks where T. Higgins outscores Jamar Chase or George Pickens outscores CeeDee Lamb. And then you have Jake Ferguson. And that's where the analogy broke down for me. Zane said he likes the Denver Broncos analogy where it's Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, Julius Thomas. To me, I said it's just like last year's Bengals, but you have two T. Higgins, because I think Ferguson's still lock and load top 3 fantasy tight end. I think he is going to have more catches than Pickens to close out the year. It's just, from a DFS perspective, more than anything, it's, you really want to target Ferguson in zone heavy matchups. You want to target, give a bump to Pickens over Ferguson in these man heavy, single high heavy matchups. But yeah, bottom line is league winners. Like, I remember doing this podcast with you last year and it being, week 7, week 8, and we're like drooling over the Bengals, who had this amazing fantasy playoff strength of schedule, and being like, it really might just be the winner of leagues this year is whoever has the most exposure to Bengals players, whoever has the most Chase Brown, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow. And that was largely correct. Like, Jamar Chase just outscoring any other wide receiver by like 60 fantasy points. And it looks like that's going to be the case again this year, where it's Javonte Williams, one of the best ADP beaters in all of fantasy football, CeeDee Lamb balling out, Dak Prescott balling out, George Pickens, Jake Ferguson all balling out. Also, shout out to us. My Exodia runner-up was Dak Prescott. Jake Ferguson was my favorite sleeper tight end. And yeah, it just looks like things are awesome. The only thing to watch out for is if we see this defense take a significant step forward, which is possible, but probably not too likely.
Yeah, there's some rumors out there that Max Crosby might be a Dallas Cowboy.
That got shut down by very quickly, but that would be sick. That would be awesome, because like that's another like analytics angle I've always had on Max Crosby is he's had like the worst support system, where the edge rushers who typically lead the league in pressures almost always have like one or two other really good pass rushers on the team. But like with Max Crosby, it's always only been Max Crosby. So like pressure rate market share is just always Max Crosby by himself by a landslide. So I would love to see that but that got shut down pretty quickly. Probably not going to happen.
Scott Barrett sneaking in a IDP take for
Yeah.
our IDP listeners, all two of them for the School of Scott Fantasy Football Podcast. Shout out to you, IDP crowd. Okay, Scott, Joe Flacco has 5 touchdown passes over the last 2 weeks and simply breaking fantasy points data in many metrics with how hyper utilized Jamar Chase has been with him. We talked about this last week. We talked about this 2 weeks ago. Joe Flacco understands the opportunity in front of him. It's the best offensive skill position player he's ever played with. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to get this guy the ball. And Joe Flacco is now a locked-in Superflex starter. Your thoughts on Flacco, your thoughts on just how these Bengals are looking. Are they fully back?
They're largely back. They're back to a very large degree. We talked about this a few weeks ago, and I was kind of not as optimistic as you are. And I think you were right. But like part of my argument was, I don't think Jake Browning was as bad as Jake Browning was. And I also don't think Joe Flacco is going to be as good as he was last week. Because strength of schedule matters. Jake Browning from weeks 2 through 5 faced every single one of those defense ranked top 12 in EPA per dropback. 3 of the 4 ranked top 6. And then Flacco faced the Steelers, who rank behind only the Cowboys in schedule adjusted fantasy points per game, both to quarterbacks and wide receivers. The good news I will say is the Bengals remaining strength of schedule is really, really soft. So that's great. And then even if, that schedule is playing a large role and it wasn't about to be amazing across the remainder of the season, it is good that they're letting Flacco air it out. They're not playing conservative at all. He's had at least 45 passes in back-to-back games. And then for Higgins, that gets amplified by the fact that Flacco understands the assignment. He targeted Jamar Chase 23 times. That was the third most since targets became a stat in 1992. Sorry. And it was the second most XFP by any player in any game in fantasy points data history. 38% target share, over 50% first read rate these last 2 weeks. And like, that's what you do. That is what you do. Jamar Chase is the best wide receiver in football. He is open even when he's not open. So like he demands double-digit targets every single game. And Jake Browning, I think he was overthinking things. Chase just averaged 8 targets per game across his 3 starts. And so just the aggressiveness combined with, really the focal point on Chase and the remaining strength of schedule is, I do think, I think the Bengals are back to a large degree. I think Flacco is going to surprise us. I think he's, a good DFS play. I think he's like a fringe QB1. I think Chase is like an easy top 3 wide receiver, maybe the overall wide receiver 1 moving over. He's going to battle it out with JSN and Puka Nacua. I would put him 3. And then T. Higgins, probably high-end wide receiver 3. Chase Brown is still dead, but the passing game is, certainly something to be excited about, significantly better than the first month of the season for sure.
Yeah, and Scott, this week the Bengals go up against the hapless New York Jets, but the Jets are about middle of the pack when it comes to fantasy points allowed versus opposing wide receivers. Talk about fantasy points data and the free tools you're rolling out.
Yeah, so we just rolled out a number of free tools. So you can head on over to data.fantasypoints.com, check these out. It's our weekly reports tools where you can just very easily pull up and see route share changes, every single wide receiver by route share by team, how that changes on a week-to-week basis, snap share report, target share report, which includes first read targets if you know how to work the filters. And so, this is just, I had this in a spreadsheet for years, and then we built fantasy points data, and it remains, some of my most valuable, tools that I look at constantly. And then we're rolling out a new tool, which is not free, but it's long overdue. That's our fantasy points allowed tool. So it's just, fantasy points per game allowed to quarterbacks, to running backs, to slot wide receivers, outside wide receivers, to tight ends. And it has all of our filters. So if you want to see, which defense is giving up the most busted coverage to opposing quarterbacks, or the worst to best passer rating on first read targets, or defense is giving up the most deep receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers or slot wide receivers, you can look at that. This was long overdue. We thought we were going to have this 2 years ago, but it's something tricky on the back end, and we finally figured it out. So that is going to be available to paid subscribers. It's going to be the best, matchup tool you can have access to. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. Data.fantasypoints.com. Price, I think, is pretty cheap right now, and you can use promo code Theo for an extra
promo code Theo.
Extra 15% off.
Yeah, check it out. All the stuff over at Fantasy Points Data, it's just like once you try it out, it's something where you can't get away from it. It's hard to explain unless you've actually tried it. So highly encourage you to try out the free tools over at fantasypoints.com. Go to Fantasy Points Data. The team behind Fantasy Points Data, just absolutely the best in the business. Just how quickly we get that data up over there. Big shout out to Brett Whitefield and his team of charters behind the scenes, just making the thing work. Scott, let's talk about, Let's talk about Trey McBride. Just one of the more tilting takeaways here. Trey McBride now has as many touchdown grabs with Jacoby Brissett as he has with Kyler Murray. And this is like, you sort of see this, what Trey McBride could be with another quarterback here. Really, really frustrating stuff to see him just cooking at this level with the touchdowns on top of the high-end target total and the PPR points that he always accumulates. Trey McBride's been unbelievable the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's largely due to Jacoby Brissett. Like this has been one of my hot takes for years, is that Kyler is mid. Kyler has not grown or progressed since his rookie season. Jacoby Brissett has now thrown for 275 plus passing yards and 2+ touchdowns in back-to-back games. Kyler Murray hasn't done that in over 4 years. It looks like a better offense. And even if that's not true, it looks like a more functional, a more modern offense. Brissett already has more dropbacks and yards, and twice as many yards under center than Kyler has all year. When you're 5'10", I think it really limits kind of what you can do, the plays you can call. And so like one of the added bonuses of Jacoby Brissett is that he loves tight ends. He's targeted tight ends at the highest rate in the league, like just about every year of his career. And then dating back to college, he targeted tight ends like 5 times more than the FBS average rate. The dude just loves him some tight ends. And so, yeah, Trey McBride, one of the best tight ends in football, is really just getting force fed the ball, and there's good efficiency there. And this looks great. So, Trey McBride, for sure, a player I'm going to have DFS exposure to again this week, and maybe some Jacoby Brissett stacks.
Trey McBride is on pace for 114 catches. And if he does hit that, Scott, he could actually catch fewer than that. But if he's somewhere in that range by the end of the season, not only are we going to be keeping an eye on him breaking Zach Ertz's all-time single season high with like 116, but Trey McBride has a chance to have the most receptions by any tight end over a 2-year period. Unbelievable what he's been able to accomplish.
I will say sure. Jake Ferguson still has more.
Jake Ferguson for now. Yeah. Both are doing quite well, but yeah, Ferguson absolutely crushing. Let's also talk about, you talked about this. We don't need to go that into depth on this one. We talk about it every single week, but in the Everything Report, you and Ryan discuss who is this year's RB1 overall. Scott, it's a vintage year for this, where you have 3 players scoring at just an unbelievable rate, with Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan Robinson. It's to the point where Jahmyr Gibbs just goes absolutely nuts, is leading the NFL in rushing yardage. Jahmyr Gibbs is absolutely sick. Hit 22 miles an hour on Monday Night Football. And we're not like talking about him, and he's averaging 20 points per game on the season, and we're not like even talking about him as an RB1 overall threat. Josh Jacobs is averaging 20.6 points per game. You actually have 5 running backs averaging north of 20 points per game, and Achane by this time next week could be the sixth one. He's at 19.5, a vintage year for running backs, but
tough year for the zero RB boys.
I know. I got a couple of zero RB builds that are not that good right now.
Actually, we have some that are great.
I have an
FFPC Judkins.
I have a main event team, the one of my own that's number 1 because I have Jamar Chase and Jaxson Smith and Jigba, and then a bunch of tight ends, including Jake Ferguson, and my running backs are like hurting zero RB build. So yeah, you can different ways to skin a cat here, but you certainly over the second half of the season, the scoring can obviously tilt towards wide receivers. But yeah, right now it's looking like if you have one of those big 3, you're in great shape each and every week. Who are you betting on at this point? Are you still on Christian McCaffrey? Is another player sort of making a case to be the RB1 overall ahead of him?
Yeah, let me give a case for Jonathan Taylor, which is that he has 3 games with 3 or more rushing touchdowns, which is insane. Daniel Jones has 3 career games with 3 or more passing touchdowns. Just to put that into perspective, he's being heavily involved in the passing game as well as crushing on the ground. Only 3 players in NFL history have ever had a 1,000 season, and Bijan Robinson is on pace for that. But so is Christian McCaffrey. And Christian McCaffrey just got George Kittle back, which is a massive boost to his rushing production and efficiency. You've always seen that. Ryan was on this heading into last week where he had this great stat that was like, last year, with George Kittle on the field, McCaffrey averaged like 4.8 yards per carry. With him off the field, it was like 3.2. And then, Christian McCaffrey finally had a good game on the ground. He was running really unlucky, but like because of who he is through the air, if you just removed all of his carries, mind you, he currently leads the league in carries, but if you threw all of them out, he'd be a top 5 wide receiver by receiving fantasy points per game. And then you add in, he's getting like 18 carries per game. He is just such an absolute cheat code. I'm still doubling down on my take that JSN should be the NFL MVP through 7 weeks, which by the way, his odds went from 400 to 1 to 100 to 1. But for fantasy MVP, who's going to be the guy to really, really swing leagues more valuable than anyone else? It's probably Christian McCaffrey, so long as he stays healthy, which granted is a big if. And that's who he's been. 2 years ago, it was the same thing. It was like, this was one of the most mind-blowing stats. I think Ryan and I put out all year, and it was harder to win your championship without Christian McCaffrey 2 years ago than it was to win your league with him last year. And it's just like, that is the definition of a power law player. And that is Christian McCaffrey, just like the most valuable player. You had a stat in Discord DMs a couple of weeks ago where it was like, Josh Jacobs has finished top 7 in 80% of his last 18 games, whatever it was. But like the Christian McCaffrey,
it was a Bijan Robinson one versus CMC.
It's nothing. It's nothing. The Christian McCaffrey version of that stat is something like Christian McCaffrey has finished top 3 among running backs in fantasy points in 92% of his last fully healthy, 53 fully healthy games. Like I remember, I haven't done it in a year, but like last time I did it, just like blew my, like no one else was even like a third of that for top 3, top 6, top 12. And then from an XFP per game standpoint, it's still far and away the best volume I've ever seen. The gap between McCaffrey at number 1 to Jonathan Taylor at 2 is the same gap as Jonathan Taylor to DeAndre Swift, who like he's had 2 good weeks in a row, but his volume's not good. Like he's averaging like 13 carries and 4 targets per game. So just absolute league wrecker. I think, it's like Christian McCaffrey, Bijan, Jonathan Taylor, Puka, JSN, Jamar. These are the guys who are really gonna swing leagues this year. CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor. I might go Jonathan Taylor over CMC, and it's not just me trying to be like a CMC hater here, but Jonathan Taylor, like, okay, why are we ruling out? There's gonna be Bijan Robinson people here saying, and I love Bijan, but Bijan has to deal with being on this Atlanta Falcons offense, and you've seen multiple weeks now where the offense is not as productive on the road as they are at home. It just it's a limitation. But with Jonathan Taylor, this is an offense where this is one of the best offenses that we've seen ever. And even if they bottom out by a few points per game, like they're top 20 all time. Right now, the Indianapolis Colts are averaging about exactly as many points per game as a team as last year's Detroit Lions, with Ben Johnson running the show and us sort of going crazy every week about how good that Lions offense is. They're averaging very similar numbers to the Rams' greatest show on turf, Dick Vermeil, Kurt Warner team. They're averaging about the exact same amount of points per game as the Lamar Jackson 2019 MVP season Ravens. I just think you're going to see the offensive ecosystem lending itself to Jonathan Taylor putting up so many more smash week after smash week after smash week. I think that CMC is going to continue to cook. You do bring up Kittle. Scott, I'll throw it out to you. When Kittle sort of trends up here and we don't see a 0 target week, there also could be George Kittle weeks on the horizon where I feel like it's just more mouths to feed for Christian McCaffrey to deal with than Taylor. And again, we're splitting hairs. McCaffrey still is going to average 23 points, something like that. But I think we could be headed towards Jonathan Taylor keeping this 25 point per game type average for the entire season, having his vintage season, making his previous running back one overall season just pale in comparison to this one. And he's doing just enough as a receiver to sort of like where we're not able to like completely knock him and say, oh, he's not catching enough passes. He has 23 catches this year. This is very good production for Taylor, but it's really the Colts offensive environment that I think is lending itself to Jonathan Taylor having just an exceptional season, maybe edging out CMC. That would just be my pick.
Yeah, one of the best stats I've seen was apparently by points per drive, the Colts are having the best season since like the 1990s, at least through the first 7 weeks of the season. Yeah, but I mean, like maybe in a standard league, I'd give that to you. But dude, Christian McCaffrey is a fantasy wide receiver one mixed with a fantasy RB1. Like I don't think anyone can just touch that. And yeah, Kittle comes back, Pearsall comes back, but that just means more touchdown potential for CM. Like he can be the focal point of the offense, but he could also be, just when the offense is humming, just a guy who, scored like the 49ers, Jahmyr Gibbs score a bunch of touchdowns, actually have some efficiency with Kittle blocking. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's CMC by a lot, but I've seen the debate enough on Twitter to know, I'm a lot of people don't think it's a lot closer than I do.
I love almost all of your takes. I think you and Ryan, I usually am agreeing with you guys, and sometimes I'll say, hey, I didn't know that. That's amazing. Everything report every week. There's definitely something where you guys uncover it. But one thing I strongly disagreed with, and I don't know if this was a Ryan Heath take or a Scott Barrett take, but there's a little bit of a fear with Achane rest of the season if he was traded. We just talked about Christian McCaffrey, who years back was very successful, gets traded from Carolina to San Francisco and took his game just to the same, if not better level. Why can't Achane be even better when you put him on a better offense? For instance, one of the teams that's rumored to be trying to trade for him is the Seattle Seahawks. I would argue that he would completely nuke Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet and go nuts in what could be a really good offense. And that's just a example. I think if Achane was actually getting moved, there'd be teams we wouldn't even think about that would view him as an upgrade at the position and would attempt to trade for him. What if he went to Washington? I mean, I could throw out a million teams here that Achane would cook for. Why is there apprehension here? Was this your take? Was this Ryan's take? Sort of explain it away.
Yeah, this was a Ryan take, and I think I disagree with it. I think it's similar to like him disagreeing with my Rashee Rice take, where it's like you have to understand, like no one is higher on Achane than Ryan. And like it's easy to be super high on Achane. He has a 21.7% target share. That is like, well, it leads the team, tied with Waddle. It's behind only Christian McCaffrey among running backs. So elite receiver at the running back position. And then like, remember who Achane is. Like he struggled last year, was dealing with injuries, some other stuff. But the year before that, he had the most yards per carry of any 100 carry runner all time. And it looks like that's back. He's had a yards per carry of at least 5.0 in 4 of his last 5 games. And so, Waddle got hurt last week. He is seeing Achane as the 49ers Christian McCaffrey, like the 49ers Christian McCaffrey when Kittle, Jawan, Pearsall were all hurt and, guaranteed top 5 fantasy running back every week. I think a trade could be a very good thing, especially if it's the Seattle Seahawks, which I don't know why they hate Kenneth Walker so much. It breaks my heart. And a lot of subscribers are really mad at me for recommending Kenneth Walker, and I feel really bad about it. Ryan and I did an impromptu podcast on Sunday, came out on Monday, where we talked about this. You hear the coaching staff asked about why Charbonnet is getting so many touches, and they're like, well, sometimes, things matter more to us than just success on a per touch basis, which like you never hear coaches. I think the guy's dealing with a foot injury still, or, they just hate him for some reason. But what would happen is like, dude, he would go nuclear with the Seahawks. Look at Clint Kubiak's track record. Who did he have 2 years ago? He had Christian McCaffrey in one of the best fantasy seasons ever. Who did he have last year? He had Alvin Kamara, who, had his best yards per carry in like 7 years and also was such a massive PPR cheat code. So you have Davante Adams-type, who's probably the closest living player to both of those guys, smashing in a great offense. And yeah, I think he's just like so immune, and there's upside too, where it's like you have the efficiency on the ground, you have the pass catching ability, and on a better team, you have more touchdown upside. Touchdowns are worth a lot of points. They're one touchdown's worth 60 yards. So I disagreed with Ryan on this one. And I know you did too, but bottom line, and we're all in agreement that Achane is awesome and a super valuable fantasy asset.
Yeah, that Ryan Heath guy usually runs really, really pure, but on this one, Ryan, you got to revise that one a little bit. Big shout out to Ryan Heath. Make sure you're checking out all of his work over at fantasypoints.com every single week and over at Dynasty Points. Ryan Heath joined me last week on Fantasy Football Daily. We talked about our top 150 rest of the season rankings update. A couple of guys we encourage you to trade for. That is still an evergreen podcast at this point. Scott, we talked about Achane. We talked about the 49ers. Let's talk about a couple of running back fallers, because it's sort of not all rainbows here. Kyren Williams, really frustrating one for Kyren Williams managers, with Davante Adams taking all of those goal line looks. Also, we talked about Javonte Williams earlier. Earlier in the season, it was sort of the Travis Etienne bounce back. That looks like it's disappearing as well. Your thoughts on Kyren and Travis Etienne, how we should be valuing them moving forward?
Maybe this is another one I sort of disagreed with Ryan on. His point was like, okay, Kyren got all the work in the first half, but in the second half, Blake Corum came in, and like we want Kyren to get that garbage time work. Those are valuable touches. Corum had 10 carries in the second half, and both of the teams 2 carries inside the 10-yard line. But still, I don't think any of us had any pretense that Kyren was a top 5, top 6 fantasy asset. I think this is, a valuable role in a good offense. And yeah, he gets pulled in garbage time like most running backs do. And then Travis Etienne, I am, for sure in agreement with him. I think, coming out of the bye, there's a chance we see Bajal Tootin get a real shot at being the guy, or maybe they build up to that. But I think that's in the range of outcomes. Etienne, multiple seasons in a row now, starts off really hot and then kind of just falls off a cliff after the first month or so of the season. So just something to monitor. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to be Tootin right away, but I do think there's a window because of the self-scouting angle when teams are on buys, especially a coach like Liam Cohen, and especially because it was a lopsided loss. And sometimes a lopsided loss will cause teams to sort of pivot a little bit. So for me, Jacksonville, I'm not sure how they look coming out of the bye week, but I do think getting Bashal Tootin more involved in the second half of the year has always been sort of the thesis for us. Kyren, I don't know. I think where Ryan had him somewhere in a mid RB2, like I think that's probably where we're valuing him. I'm just not that excited. Lineups that I have with Kyren, I know we've seen him put up a couple of weeks this year that are really, really impactful. But I think for me, it's like, don't go into it expecting it. Expect him to be sort of RB2 and then sort of be happy. I'm adjusting my expectations. Davante Adams is such a threat around the goal line. Puka Nacua is going to have an unbelievable to finish as soon as he gets healthy. So I'm looking at Kyren Williams sort of the third cog in this offense. And I think the threat is there for Blake Corum to mix in a little bit more than in years past. So yeah, I'm sort of with Ryan on both of these players. One player that I've got to pick your brain on here is DeVonta Smith. And what's very interesting, we have DeVonta Smith and Jalen Hurts on a shared FFPC main event team. We drafted them for the stack. This was obviously a huge week for that. But we've now seen Jalen Hurts with 3 straight weeks with 280 plus passing yards. And I know one of those weeks was them in a trailing environment against the Giants, but this seemed like an important step forward for Hurts and a different sort of play calling from Kevin Patullo. A.J. Brown did get the 2 big touchdown grabs, but DeVonta Smith dominated him in yardage and in target volume and in catches. Are you seeing it as I'm seeing it, where DeVonta Smith might be the Eagle that you want to roster moving forward at the wide receiver position? Or are you a little bit apprehensive and things are sort of going to even out for AJ?
I really have no take here. I have no idea what's going on in Philadelphia. Because that was one of the questions Ryan and I were trying to answer, because I know this is the question a lot of our readers were asking, is like, hey, are the Eagles actually back? They finally had a good game. Did Kevin Patullo figure things out? I think probably not, but really we kind of just need more data to ingest. And right now I just don't know, but I did get a really good take on DeVonta Smith that kind of, aligns with where you're leaning, from one of our film charters, Zach Swalls. Shout out to our film charting staff. I already mentioned Zane. I just mentioned Zach Swalls, and Bill O'Brien is another one who writes the article notes from the, charting underground that you could read. So I'm an analytics guy. I'm not a great film guy, but I feel like I am, just because I talk to these 3 charters and our whole charting staff. I read this article, so helps me to, bring the film and the analytics to get also tons of phone calls with Brett Whitefield. And so Zach, this was his quote. I think this Eagles offense wants to run through DeVonta. He's moving around the formation more, running routes across the middle, including easy button hitches. AJ seems stuck strictly on the outside, running more outside routes. And even his touchdown was more of a scramble drill where he ad-libbed a 9 route and broke away from Josh Metellus. And yeah, maybe that's what it is. Across the full season, they're basically tied in XFP per game. DeVonta Smith is actually a little bit ahead. And before that, Dallas Goedert was out targeting AJ Brown by a wide margin over the previous few weeks. And yeah, I mean, like, this kind of doesn't make sense to me. Like, I know DeVonta Smith is really good. This is a dude who won the Heisman Trophy, which doesn't happen for non-quarterbacks or for wide receivers. I think it was the first one in 30 years. But also, like, AJ Brown is like a guaranteed top 5 wide receiver on any offense in football. But hey, this really smart film film mind thinks that is the case. And, you know, when you have a new play caller, offenses can look differently, players can be better or worse. So it's something to monitor. It's something like I'm storing in the back of my mind, but you asked me about the Eagles. I really just don't like it's confusing to me, but there is this to look at and point to.
Yeah, I thought the craziest stat was DeVonta Smith scored that really long touchdown this past week, and it was play action under center for Jalen Hurts. And that was like one of the first times they've done that all season long. Kevin Patullo.
Well, you know who called the play? It's DeVonta Smith.
Who's that? DeVonta Smith called it?
Yeah, it's like, yeah, let's go under center here. So yeah, I don't think Kevin Patullo's very good, but yeah, this is something, Ryan talked about in play callers. We talked about all off season are these play calling efficiency cheat codes, these play calling hacks, under play action, during snap motion, pre-snap motion, and then like under center play action is like way better than shotgun play action. And the Eagles haven't done that at all this year. And then they did it one play last week and it worked in a major way, but like the Kevin Patullo wasn't the one who called it was the players.
One other wide receiver who we have on an FFPC main event team, we also have him on the 350 team with Rich, is Jordan Addison. And I like victory lapping this one because it feels like for like 3 years, I've been encouraging people that read my Dynasty article, the Dynasty Market Report at Fantasy Points. Multiple times I've talked about Jordan Addison as an ascending player, a player to buy, was encouraging people to draft him in redraft this offseason. I love Jordan Addison and his skill set. We saw him get suspended for the early portion of the year, but Scott, it's now been 15 points, and a big week this past week. He's now averaging 17 points per game plus on the season. Short sample size, but it feels like this is a really big year 3, and it's going to continue for Jordan Addison.
So 17.7 fantasy points per game on the short season, small sample, like you said. Zoom out. Look over his last 11 games with Justin Jefferson. How many 11 games? How many of those games do you think Addison outscored Jefferson?
Well, guessing by your tone of voice, I'm going to say 6 or 7.
Yeah,
I think it's going to be an impressive one.
6 out of 11. So the majority of those games outscored Justin Jefferson, who a lot of people think is the best wide receiver in football. You look at the averages, 18.1 fantasy points per game for Justin Jefferson, 17.6 for Jordan Addison, both top 10 numbers at the wide receiver position in just about any year. And and so like how are your league mates valuing these players? Probably like, oh yeah, Justin Jefferson top 3 every single week. Jordan Addison, I don't know, mid-range, low-end wide receiver 2. It's not what the numbers say. And so, I beat this drum all off season. I've been talking about this every single week in the Everything Report or in my DFS slate breakdown. Addison went off last week. I think I wrote him up as my favorite GPP play. That said, like I don't think I'm true to my word here because like in my own internal rankings, I still have it like, it's a bye week, heavy bye week. But I have it like Jefferson top 3. I have Addison mid-range wide receiver 2. But like you look at the numbers and they're kind of the same guy. And like, hey, Addison was a first round pick, a Biletnikoff winner, really talented player. So, yeah.
And he's a touchdown scorer. Jordan Addison continually puts
right. And so like that's part of maybe why I don't fully buy into it is like it looks like a regression candidate. But Ryan and I a couple of weeks ago did talk about how this year, perhaps more than ever, with this change in kickoff rules, dude, touchdowns are really important, really impactful, and probably matter more than most years.
And Scott, we had a bunch more to cover, but we do have to get to the trades. Where on X, I put up a post saying that Scott and I would take some of your trade questions. We're going to try to have interactive things like this. Check out Scott's Twitter. Check out my Twitter. We're going to try to put some interactive things over the second half of the season to really help you win in the weeks that matter most for you for your fantasy teams. But Scott, before we get to that, one player we do have to touch on. I had a big DFS week. I mean, I text you, maybe 12:30 on Sunday on the East Coast. I'm like, what do you think of this DFS lineup? And
you're we gotta talk about
yeah.
Theo.
So listen, I like mixing it up with the DFS once in a while. I leave it to Scott and Ryan and Jake Tribby and the team. But I'm like, I'm playing DFS, trying to win a little money, trying to have a little fun. And I came really close this weekend, Scott, in a couple of contests. Still ended up being very profitable week. But I had the Justin Herbert and Rondé Gadsden. I had Rashee Rice. I had Jonathan Taylor. I had Javonte Williams. Pretty much everything hit. My two pivots that if I could have changed, I would have been, a six-figure weekend was if I went Keenan Allen instead of Quentin Johnston, which I was pretty close on. And then one other little small mini shift. I really like the Cleveland defense, but I went with the Carolina defense, who also ran pure, but that was about 6 points difference there. So maybe I would have been a little bit closer, but it's still a very profitable week. So yeah, man, DFS, I'm in the mix. I'm in the mix. I just don't talk about it.
I know. So you sent me in the morning, you sent me the team and you're like thoughts. And I'm like, that's a really good lineup. And then I like thoughts about it, like, that is a really good lineup.
And Judkins. I had Judkins too.
Yeah, it was in the red zone, which is a $50 buy-in. I won it a few years ago. You win 25,000. And so Theo had what we call a sweat, where he had a really good chance of winning it all. In the fourth quarter of the 4 p.m. games, he was at one point, because I was watching. You could watch it live, and I was tracking. You were at one point fourth or fifth. I think you finished, 10th?
Yeah, I was 10th in that one, and then I entered a couple others there was like the $100,000 prize one I entered, and I entered a couple others. So it was like cash across maybe like 5 contests. So yeah,
I think you won a bunch of money, but like a real chance at like you really got to finish first to make a big impact. That's what we're all chasing. And you had a Rondé Gadsden at super low ownership.
Oh, yeah.
Shout out to the Everything Report. Last week when Ryan and I were, so the way the Everything Report works, if you're not a subscriber, is we try and like come up with like 3 to 5 key takeaways at the top, and we write a bunch of words on it, and then like quicker hits on quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. And we try to get to everyone and everything. That's why it's the Everything Report. And so Ryan and I were like, what are the big, talking points? And it's like, all right, is BTJ back? And Ryan's like, I'll take that. The other one is Ladd McConkey back? And I was like, I'll take that. And I basically was like, no, I don't think Ladd McConkey's back. And it was a Ladd McConkey blurb. I ended up writing 6 paragraphs on my love for Rondé Gadsden. And we talked about him on this podcast. The guy went nuclear. Like, I'm surprised we haven't talked about him on this podcast. Is that a top 6 dynasty tight end?
I talked about this. I talked about this with Jax Falcone, who's a friend of the show. Shout out to the Undroppable. Shout out to the Undrafted. Jax has come on Dynasty Life on this channel. I've gone on his podcast a bunch, and we're in a Dynasty League with him. We talked about it, and we both, during the course of the game, were sort of somewhere in the top, I would say top 8. Gadsden's locked in at top 8. The sample size is really small, and we don't want to get over the top here. But I do think when we're talking about Gadsden, not to get too hyperbolic here, but we have to start looking at, because of his profile, because of the fact that he's basically an overgrown wide receiver who some NFL teams thought would be a wide receiver in the league, you have to start talking about some of the unicorn day 3 wide receivers who hit at an exceptional level. Guys like Tyreek Hill, guys like Puka Nacua, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, who put up these sort of, massive fantasy performances. And then from a tight end perspective, you start looking at George Kittle year 2. And it was really a dynasty take more than anything with Rondé Gadsden. And first of all, like a quick little shout out, readers of my waiver wire column added him in week 4. We added him in week 4. You started him on an FFPC main event team this past week too. So we're not just theoretically talking about Rondé Gadsden. Like, if you want to know like why you should have a fantasy point subscription, like you don't have to spend fab this week. So, get yourself a little fantasy point subscription sub and get access to our waivers early on. Like we were on this one weeks ago because he had the big performance in week 3 as well. I think he might be a unicorn. I don't think we should have the conversation yet because it's sort of like, I don't want to have pie on the face, but your initial reaction on him as a prospect, I think was correct. And I think maybe we docked the draft capital a little bit too much, but I'm starting to think that he could end up being a unicorn. It's an impactful, transformative tight end class. Tyler Warren, Harold Fannin. We haven't even seen Colston Loveland do a thing yet. He's not buried. He's got an opportunity now. But I think Oronde Gadsden at the end of the day is going to be a potentially Darren Waller part 2. And
That's
he's
what his
on a
tight
team.
end coach said in the offseason.
Yeah.
And then Jim Harbaugh was like, yeah, I've seen this movie before. I think this is going to work out well for us with Gadsden.
Yeah, so we'll keep talking about Oronde Gadsden, but we don't have to talk about him because you already have him on your roster. Shout out to Joe Dolan. Shout out to Tom Brawley. We talked about him at length multiple times. We talked about him in week 6. We talked about him in week 7. We've talked about him in every week. So, let everybody else tell you to go at him on the waiver wire. It's funny, Scott. It's like two Americas here where you have people telling you to add Jaxson Dart this week on the waiver wire, people telling you to add Oronde Gadsden, like fantasy point subs. We don't need.
You're ahead of the curve. Yeah.
We're ahead of the curve here. We're helping you win in fantasy. We're going to try to help you win on your trades right now. Scott, let's take a few of these. Oof, you're not going to like this one. Actually, you might like this one. I misread this. This is from Mark C. At Smark Power on X. Mark C says, "Would you trade Rome and George Pickens for Puka Nacua?" I think I'm absolutely doing that trade to tier up from Pickens and Rome Odunze for Puka Nacua. Rome Odunze's, his production, his usage has gone down considerably. I'm a huge George Pickens fan, but 6 targets this week. I think we're going to see a lot of that 6 to 9 target range for him. Whereas Puka Nacua was 25 points per game type guy, right up there with Chase. And I where are you out on this one? 2 for 1.
I for sure lean more towards Puka, and I just checked with Ball Knowledge, Fantasy Points AI, and I asked it Rome Odunze or George Pickens for Puka Nacua. It agrees with us. Edge to Puka Nacua. Working off of our rest of season rankings, it is 1,031 points for Puka Nacua, 960 points for Odunze and Pickens. So it is close, but lean to Puka. Generally want the better of these 2 for 1 deals. And Puka just looks like, like I said, a power law player to me.
Okay, another fun question. This is from Rebel Yank. Trade away Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle, and Oronde Gadsden. Get back Cortland Sutton and Derrick Henry. So this is a 3 for 2. Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle, Oronde Gadsden. Gets back Cortland Sutton and Derrick Henry. This is PPR. And his other running backs, his or her other running backs are Jahmyr Gibbs, Quinshon Judkins, and his tight end, he's got Kittle. So he feels like he can trade away Gadsden here. So Hall, Waddle, Gadsden, or Sutton and Derrick Henry.
Yeah, I would lean more towards the Waddle side. This is a player I gave you a lot of grief for, Theo, because you kept trying to make me draft him on all of our FFPC teams. And now I'm looking at this and he looks to me like the most valuable asset in this deal, which is what you want to lean towards. Derrick Henry, I think you had Jonathan Taylor as this year's Saquon, and I had Henry as this year's Saquon. This Ravens defense is so bad. By the way, that was a big takeaway from last week's Everything Report is Lamar Jackson is one of the best buy lows. I think he's going to be the rest of season fantasy QB1 because that defense is so bad. He has to be Superman, but it kills Derrick Henry, the most game script sensitive player in fantasy history. Breece Hall, I think, has some upside if they use him more in the passing game or if they trade him. I just asked Ball Knowledge. They agree. They think the Breece Hall, Jalen Waddle side wins. I think that side wins as well.
Okay, I'm with you. I'm on the Waddle side there too. And also, I'd like to see, I think Gadsden's value is going to go up a little bit more. I don't know if you necessarily are on the 3-for-2 type side there after this week. This is from John Russell, Superflex PPR. He's saying, should he give up Jaden Daniels, Drake London, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and he would get back Jared Goff, Jamar Chase, and Kyren Williams? I kind of lean towards the Goff Chase side because Jaden Daniels is now banged up. Drake London I love, but he's not even in the same class as Jamar Chase, and he's more reliant on these home type games. And Kyren Williams ahead of Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Even in Superflex, I think I'm on the Chase side. How about you?
I don't know. This one's kind of tough. I don't know. It feels even to me. If I'm being honest, I think maybe it's worth us talking about. I just ask Ball Knowledge, fantasypoints.ai. If you're a standard sub, you get 5 free questions. If you're a premium sub, you get 10 free questions per week. If you're an all-in sub, you get unlimited questions. Looks like it likes the Chase side. It looks like 1575 points versus 1397. So again, it's really close. But it likes the Chase side. Jaden Daniels dealing with another injury. I think it's a really close trade. I will say, I think we should talk about Drake London just because I've gaslit a number of our subscribers. I've gaslit myself.
You even gaslit somebody in this thread. Just Drew it said, now that Mooney is back healthy, Scott Barrett has brainwashed me into thinking it's time to sell London. If I package London and Kraft for London and Jordan Mason, who should I be going after? So basically, you're influencing questions in this Twitter thread as well, Scott. So we'll answer Drew's and then you do your take. London and Kraft or London and Jordan Mason for. I'm misunderstanding this. If he packages. Oh, he's asking an open-ended, who should I be going after? Yeah, just Drew it. Check out our top 150 updates. Look for players tiers above Drake London. If I'm trading Drake London and Tucker Kraft, I'm looking to tier up to a CeeDee Lamb, perhaps. If I'm trading Drake London and Jordan Mason, I'm looking to tier up into the Devon Achane, Josh Jacobs type of running back. I don't think you're going to get the true RB1s, the true wide receiver ones, but give your Drake London take here, Scott.
So he crushed without Mooney, 8+ catches, 110+ yards, and a touchdown back-to-back games. Darnell Mooney comes back, 8.2 fantasy points. Darnell Mooney scores 9.8. I will say the targets were there. He had twice as many targets as Mooney, but yeah, of course, people were tagging me, Darnell Mooney fake alpha. So I had to put out another funny London versus Mooney meme. And so people want to know, is the meme real? Because how I put myself out on Twitter is just like, I don't care. I'm just trying to have fun. But in the everything report is I take myself too seriously. I put a lot of time and effort. I want to give good advice. And so that's the question. Is the meme real? We want to know. I think it's real to a degree. I link to, people now in the AI age are listening to the everything report instead of reading the everything report. There's a way to do that through Safari on your iPhone or your Google phone, whatever. You could just set it to an Australian accent and have it read the everything report. But if you do that, you miss out on some of the links. I linked to a Chris Weck tweet, which is great, where it's in the games with a healthy Mooney, London's first read target rate basically gets cut in half. So I do think this is real to a degree. And then of course, the original meme I'm talking about is that just about all of London's 100-yard games have been with Mooney hurt or inactive. With Mooney fully healthy, 0 100-yard games, or only 1, and it was a game Mooney outscored him, had more yards. So like I said, so this year first read rate gets cut in half. So it is real to a degree. It just feels nitpicky. I think the other component is one you were on very, very early, which is another tweet I linked to that I put out, is Michael Penix has the most extreme home road splits in all of football and all of fantasy football. this is big from a DFS perspective. I only play Jared Goff at home. I only consider playing CJ Stroud at home. Bo Nix is another one of these guys. All dome quarterbacks, including Penix. Bo Nix is not a dome guy, but he is an altitude guy. I don't know if that's a thing. It's also that crowd noise can play a role. So like the Lions are a very play action, very motion heavy offense. And it's tougher to do that on the road due to crowd noise. So that can play a role. But yeah, Penix, very extreme home road splits. I think that's factoring in because London averages, you could look at the splits without Mooney. You could also look at the home road splits. London averages 23 fantasy points per game at home, just 10 fantasy points per game on the road. So I think it's a mixture of all these things. I think it's real to a degree, but not really real. I think London at home and/or without Mooney, easy top 5 fantasy wide receiver. But on the road and/or with fully healthy Mooney, I think is like a low end wide receiver 2, or a high end wide receiver 2. I wouldn't be trading him. I think this is like a valuable asset. But I do think, like at points in the offseason, we talked about London leading the league in catches. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, absolutely not. I mean, pretty much a lot of the Drake London takes should have been Jaxson Smith and Jigba takes. And JSN was one that I spoke of fondly on podcasts. He was always my preferred round 3 wide receiver selection. But really, I think when we go back, a lot of the takes for London could have been JSN ones. We'll talk, and highly encourage everyone to listen to Ryan Heath and Scott Barrett, the additional School of Scott podcast that dropped recently. And if you're watching us on YouTube, big shout out to our YouTube audience who have supported this show, but you're missing out a lot if you don't also subscribe to our Fantasy Points podcast. Not everything goes up on YouTube. And we're putting out a ton of podcasts that can help you win in fantasy. Make sure you're checking out all of Scott's DFS content. That's going to be coming out later this week. You can check out a lot of that over on Fantasy Points YouTube. Make sure you're checking out my Dynasty podcast, Dynasty Life. Make sure you're checking out my Start Sit show with Graham Barfield on Fantasy Football Daily. Check out the show with Brett Whitefield on Fantasy Football Daily. We're sort of everywhere. Make sure you're subscribing to all of our feeds. It helps us out a lot. It doesn't cost you anything. And check out fantasypoints.com if you want to take your game to another level. Use the code Theo for 15% off of our already reduced packages, and we're going to help you crush your fantasy leagues this season.